Good evening and welcome to our New Year's edition of BronxTalk, featuring some of the best of 2024. We celebrated the 30th year of BronxTalk this year with 52 weekly programs about our borough. In our first Best of 2024 highlight, we go back to January 29th, when BronxTalk and BronxNet were the first cameras to get a look at the brand new $95 million nursing education, research, and practice center at Lehman College. As you will see here, it's an extraordinary facility that should provide tremendous opportunities for students and, of course, assist in providing improved health care in our home borough of the Bronx. Take a look. Here we are in the nursing skills area of the brand new nursing building at Lehman College. This is really exciting because this young lady is not well, and the nursing students can take care of her.
Yes, they can. This is an example of one of our mannequins that will be used in the nursing skills lab here.
There are 25 of them.
Yes, there are 25.
Amazing.
And they're all variations. There are male, there are female, there are older adult, and so, it's a variety representing the demographics of the Bronx.
People of different ethnicities
Different ethnicities.
And so, what can you do? I mean, apparently they can take blood pressure. What can students do here?
So this mannequin, you can program it to have different readings of blood pressure, for heart rate, heart rhythm, for different breath sounds, like somebody had pneumonia, what that sounds like. When someone's having asthma problems, we can program it for that.
So program it for that. The nursing student comes over and says, what's the matter, has to help diagnose it, and then, of course, treat the patient.
Right. They would have their stethoscope, and they would be listening to the different breath sounds and then identifying them appropriately. They would also be using, the blood pressure cuff in order to check on the patient's blood pressure. It would give a reading.
And I'm seeing here there's a terminal, so I'm assuming they can take blood and
they
do all those kinds of
could
things?
at some point do that. One of the other features is that you probably don't notice, but there's a little slit in her throat here. She didn't get attacked, but it's for this mannequin. We can do, if she had a tracheotomy, we could do that, and they could learn suctioning and care of a patient who had that. We can do checks on the pupils because the eyes can move, the pupils can dilate, they can expand, contract.
Can somebody say, it hurts, or I'm not feeling well, or something like that, and then the nurse has to deal with that?
Yeah, we do. We are able to program the mannequin, and the mannequin can speak. They can say different things. Someone in the control would be doing that, but they can moan. They can
do what we all do when we're in the hospital.
Exactly.
One of the things that I think is incredibly exciting, and we'll get some pictures of it, up on top of each bed is a camera. I guess it's a security camera of sorts, but it's really an educational camera. Talk about what that is used for and how that's going to play.
So when the students are here and they may be doing a simulation of a case for this particular patient in a small groups, then they can do what they're that would appropriately be doing for the patient. And then what could happen with the camera is it videotapes it, so that after the scenario is over, they come back into a classroom and they discuss the case and they see what they did right and how they can improve.
Look at the video of them doing it. So I was told that, you could even simulate a heart attack.
You can.
And then a nurse would, or the student would come into the room and have to identify what it was, and then, of course, act in an emergency situation and get the patient taken care of.
Right. They could identify an arrhythmia. And one of our other rooms in our ICU area has a cardiac monitor, so that
which we will look at that in a moment. What are the nursing programs that Lehman College provides, and what students will be using this particular lab?
So in this lab, it's primarily going to be used for students who are learning to become registered nurses and get a bachelor's degree. And we have several ways of coming into that program. We have a traditional program. Those are for students who probably don't have a degree. And we have a lot of transfer students who come in and they are at Lehman and they are they want to be registered nurses with a bachelor's
And I
degree.
want to add to that, wait till they realize what this is and the opportunity they will have to really not only learn, but to do in this room. One of the biggest transportation projects in the Bronx in years is the plan to add 4 Metro North stations to the borough, thereby improving transportation to the East Bronx, which has long been a transportation desert. In March, we welcomed the director of the Department of City Planning to talk about those very plans. Take a look. People are going to look at that and say, wait a minute, you don't have high rises there. Is there enough infrastructure? You're going to put families there. We need to have schools. Sewage, obviously, the city's sewer system is overrun. Obviously, parking is a big thing, especially around a Metro North station or stations. City's going to have to do more garbage pickups, security, et cetera. How does that all come together?
Yeah, well, so
it's nice for you to have the plan. We got to live here, and the city's got to provide what it's supposed to provide.
That's right. And there's no question that when you do additional new development, whether it's residential or commercial, it has to be matched with a real infrastructure investment, whether that is the need for school or the need for physical improvements to the streets or sewer capacity or open spaces. All of those things are things that have now been studied as part of the environmental review and things that we are now working to figure out how precisely to address to deal with the needs of these communities. We're going to be talking about that through this process, which right now is ongoing and will culminate with a vote at the City Council. We look forward to working with the 4 council members who are affected and have districts in these where the 4 new stations are coming and figuring out what are the highest priority here on infrastructure, because we know that's an important part of the equation.
It's very important also to mention these are not final plans. These are the plans in process that are going to be presented that people will be able to have input on.
Yes. In fact, I would even say one additional point, which is we've proposed zoning changes, which of course can be amended through the process, but also even if we were to adopt these precise zoning changes, somebody needs to make the decision they actually want to develop something. So then you get into the conversations about the tax environment or the interest rate environment. There's a lot of complexity. I was
going to ask you about getting, I mean, it's easy to say, okay, we're going to put it up, you can draw it in a picture.
Right.
Development takes a long time.
Right.
421A is gone. Will developers come out and be ready to build? And then, of course, we want to make sure it's Bronx people getting those construction jobs and all the jobs involved.
Right. So I think this is an important point, because you can look at those beautiful images that you showed a minute ago.
You have great artists.
And I like to think that the Department of City Planning is so powerful that we can snap our fingers and actually make that happen. We cannot. But what we can do is establish a set of rules that create an environment for those sorts of changes to happen over time. As you correctly pointed out, 421A is gone. We hope and expect that a successor program in some form will come back. These zoning rules will be around for a long time, and there will probably be a variety of successor programs over the years. But our hope is that over time we see real change, thoughtful change that significantly enhances the experience for the current and future residents near these stations.
In May of 2024, DeWitt Clinton High School honored star comedian Tracy Morgan, who did attend DeWitt Clinton. We relished the opportunity to sit down with Tracy to talk about his days at Clinton, his remarkable career, the terrible accident that almost took his life, and much more. In fact, during the program, he credited Clinton for helping him develop his comedy talents. Here he is, Tracy Morgan, on Bronx Talk. When you were growing up, did you ever say to yourself, one day I think I want to be on TV?
No.
Never did?
No.
And so what was it along the way? I realize that you say your father was a comedian and all that. What was it along the way that got you to say, hey, you know what, I could kind of do
DeWitt
this?
Clinton. I mean, when
It
I
was
was there,
DeWitt Clinton
I
High
didn't have
School. Let's make a note about that.
It was DeWitt Clinton. That's where it started at, DeWitt Clinton. And I didn't have a really great childhood. I was pretty rough. And if you don't laugh, you're going to cry. So I chose to laugh and make everyone else laugh. And then it became a business later on in life.
Can you look back at what happened during those days when you were in the cafeteria cutting class and telling jokes?
I can't remember it. I mean, I'm 55 years old. I can't remember exactly.
And you've been through a lot. But what kinds of things you talk about? To me, when you sat down here,
my
you looked
dad
right
died
away.
of AIDS.
Yeah.
My brother being born with cerebral palsy. People around me dying. Crack was around. It just came on the scene. Friends passing away, getting murdered. All of that.
And somehow you found a way to
escape it.
And
my
so
sense
the
of humor.
comedy was a way to escape it. Sports was a way to escape it too.
Escape, yeah.
You played
I was
football.
on the football team, and I ran track. Pretty good. And my coach's name was Prezioso and Wasserman.
I think all of us who went to Clinton know Joe.
Who
Prez.
don't know him? Very good friends with Joe Paterno.
And what did he teach you?
Taught me discipline. Him and my dad, between my father at home teaching me discipline and then going to school, having Prez there, I think that's what guided me.
I think it's pretty interesting that we're in the middle of the Knicks playoff run, and you haven't brought the Knicks up yet. Tell me about your passion for Madison Square Garden and the New York Knicks.
Well, I'm very good friends with Dolan, the owner of the Knicks. And when I was young, I want to say about 74, 75, my father took me to a game. So going to the basketball games is bigger than just the basketball game. I remember being there with my dad, eating hot dogs, popcorn, and being all the way up there with my father. Now I'm on the floor, and when I go there, I look up because I remember where we sat.
I saw an interview, actually it was a podcast you did with Knicks players, and you said, out of all the stuff I've seen here at Madison Square Garden, my favorite moment was the Garden of Dreams.
I love giving back.
Talk about what that was and what that meant to you.
Well, we just raised recently, about 2-3 months ago, $2.5 million for the Garden of Dreams. And they focus on inner city kids. And I used to be one of those inner city kids. So it's just time for me to give back to them. And show my face so they can perform very well.
You know, I do want to close the loop on DeWitt Clinton High School. You did eventually get a diploma.
Yes, it was incredible. My first year on Saturday Night Live, I ran into the class president, Claudine. I ran into her and I told her my story, and I told her I had 4 credits to go and I never got it. And they set up a TV show, and I've never recovered that footage of that TV show where they gave me my diploma. They said, you did 12 years. You should graduate. I never got to graduate. You should have your diploma like everyone else. And I was given an honorary diploma by DeWitt Clinton. So I had that, and I was sad. It was happy and sad at the same time because my mother and my father never got to see me graduate.
I understand that when you were given the diploma, you got pretty emotional about it. It was something.
I was thinking about my parents. I know that would have made them very proud.
You went through so much as a young person.
Yeah, but there's always somebody going through more. My grandmother told me that. When you think, I thought I was bad when I met the guy with no shoes until I met the guy with no feet.
My mom used to tell me that all the time.
You know what I'm talking about.
Well, we're, Bronx boys.
When you think you're doing bad, there's somebody out there worse.
This accident that you had, I kind of can't imagine going through something like that. You were in a coma. I mean, I could list all the bones that were broken, the leg, the femur,
my face.
Your face. Do you ever wonder how you recovered? Like how you were able to
Yes, and God. And my room wasn't ready. Why you think me and you still here? You don't got to get hit by a truck. You don't got to get shot. You don't got to get stabbed. You could just go to sleep one day and not wake up. It happens to millions of people around the world. As we're talking, there's somebody somewhere going to the morgue. Ain't no more tomorrows. My room wasn't ready. When your room is ready, your room is ready.
You said your daughter saved your life twice.
Yeah.
Let's talk
She was a
about
baby when I got hit by the truck, so I had to fight to come out that coma. Because there's no way in the
Maven
world.
Sona, that's her name?
Maven Sonay.
Sonay, okay.
Maven Sonay Morgan. She's in school. And there's no way in the world I'm gonna let my daughter go through this world, this life, without knowing who her daddy was.
Back in August, during the presidential campaign, we spoke with Congressman Ritchie Torres at length, not only about politics, but also about Bronx issues that he's been working on. Take a look. One thing that caught my eye were the grants for expanding Head Start in the Bronx through Grand Street Settlement. I know it's a program you're very proud of. Talk to me a little bit about your interest in doing that and what it has resulted in, which I think is as positive a sound that I've heard about the Bronx in a very long time.
Well, you're familiar with the words of Jimmy McMillan, who said that the rent is too damn high. The same could be said of childcare. I mean, childcare is so expensive that 80% of New York families cannot afford it. And according to the Federal Department of Labor, Bronx residents pay the highest in childcare costs as a percentage of their income. Like, we in the Bronx represent ground zero for the childcare affordability crisis in not only New York City, but throughout the United States. And so given the crippling cost of childcare, I'm proud to report that I partnered with Grand Street Settlement, one of the finest non-for-profits in the city, to secure over $50 million to open 6 childcare centers in the Bronx over the next 5 years. It's a real breakthrough for a borough that has long been struggling with the crippling cost of childcare.
Do you see a further expansion of these kinds of efforts, or do you think maybe this kind of investment will inspire people to realize how important an issue it is, and maybe something from the city's point of view legislatively could be done? I'm always interested, you've known me a long time, I'm always interested in the long-term effects of something like this, because I think this is about as positive a sign that I could see for the families of the Bronx.
Look, one of the greatest challenges in our society is inequality, right, between the so-called haves and the so-called have-nots. And those who are born into poverty have less access to childcare, less access to education. The research tells us that when you intervene early in the life of a child, you can produce lifelong benefits. You can close the vocabulary gap. You can close the achievement gap. And so I'm a huge proponent of childcare, early childhood education, early intervention to lift children out of poverty and set them on a trajectory to achieve the American dream.
Just a couple of minutes left. I want to ask you about the Bodega Act. This was something, bodegas in the Bronx. What could be more common than that? And you really put something forward that I think will allow them to be safer.
Look, there's an epidemic of violence against bodegas that has been ignored for far too long. Bodegas are soft targets for violent crime. As you know, bodegas often operate 24/7, often in dangerous neighborhoods in the middle of the night. In the Bronx, we saw a vicious sledgehammer attack on a bodega worker. And bodegas are fixtures in our community. These are the smallest of small businesses. And these small businesses often are at greatest risk of violent crime, but lack the resources to secure their establishments. And so I introduced the Bodega Act, which would establish a federal grant program that would enable bodegas to purchase security systems like surveillance cameras and panic buttons. You know, just like we have a federal program that provides security funding to non-for-profits, to vulnerable non-for-profits, we ought to have a federal program that provides security funding to vulnerable bodegas, which are at heightened risk of violence.
Do you, real quick on this, and then one last question, do you see this dialogue coming up in Congress before the election, or do you think everything's going to be put off until, after the election?
Well, I intend to, press the issue. I will raise the issue with the Congressional Hispanic Caucus because, violence against bodegas have a disproportionately destructive impact on the Latino community, on the lowest income community, on places like the Bronx, where bodegas are are ubiquitous.
In our final look at Bronx Talk in 2024, let's go back to our 30th anniversary show in October, when appropriately we welcomed Borough President Vanessa Gibson to the program. In addition to talking about the history of Bronx Talk, we had an in-depth conversation about some of the borough's most pressing issues. Let's take a look. When you wake up in the morning, aside from taking care of yourself, what are the big things that you think about? This is what we've got to do here in the Bronx. This is what my larger agenda. Of course, you've got a million things to do. So what's on your mind about the borough of the Bronx, the health of it, the difficulties, et cetera?
So usually when I wake up, I am confirming my schedule for the day. I am praying that nothing happens out of the ordinary, nothing unexpected, because you usually do expect things that may come up. I am also always thinking about the larger agenda of our administration when it comes to some of the larger capital, whether it's the Metro North expansion, the work at Orchard Beach down in the South Bronx, and the Hunts Point Food Distribution Center.
Wait, I have to hold on. So we list, those are the big projects.
Those are the big ones,
The
yes.
big ones,
Yes, yes.
and you want to make sure whatever has been planned is, of
Correct.
course, being enacted.
That's right.
And so that you've got various check marks. If
right, getting
necessary,
updates.
you'll. Now, do you do that with your staff, or do you call out to like Orchard Beach folks or whatever, or does your staff handle it?
So usually we talk to the staff internally first, my planning and development team, my comms team, and then we figure out if an update is needed based on the information we have. Usually we get inquiries from media, or I do ask the BP on News 12, and people will ask, well, what's happening at the Armory? What's going on? And so based on a lot of that, we will reach out to the relevant agency and ask for an update.
Things that are difficult, things that you look at now and say, gee, we really got to get, aside from the development and other things, we got to get this addressed. And I'm sure there are many of them, but what's at the top of your mind?
Public safety is always a priority, because I think it's something that we've come a long way in the area of gun violence and domestic gender-based violence. We still have far too much violence when teenagers are victims, when parents are, burying their children. It's not acceptable. Domestic violence, the recognition month of October, we're raising awareness around that. But I think for me, public safety is probably the biggest, because it's constantly a conversation that's evolving. Working with NYPD, working with law enforcement, working with other agencies, anti-gun violence organizations, crisis management system. How can we look at the root causes of violence, why young people engage in violence in the first place? What are some of the choices and options they have? Pathways to college and careers, more rec centers, all of that we constantly think about, because it's relative to budget and policy. And so that's ongoing. That's probably the biggest challenge, because I think we've made great progress.
Let's stay with that for a second, because
sure.
hearing you talk about it, and we could go look at the list, because you were the chair of the
Yes, public safety.
Public safety. I didn't know it was policing and crime of the Public Safety Committee. So you've always been tuned into that. So you joined the NYPD recently to announce funding for public safety initiatives.
Yes.
So this was an example of you knowing this is a problem, and let's say you put up state-of-the-art security cameras in a mobile command van. An allocation of nearly $400,000 for the cameras, et cetera. Just talk about that process and what it takes to get from zero to making that
Absolutely. So earlier this year, when we had our State of the Borough in March, we outlined our blueprint for the borough. And we talked about major capital, we talked about economic development, creating jobs, lowering the unemployment rate, and really focusing on the issues that matter, one of which is public safety. And I knew at that time I wanted to do something more. And I know that lighting and cameras are a part of public safety. It's not the only answer, but a part of the conversation. So I committed that I would do something for NYPD, because many residents will say, we need a camera in this area. We need a camera here. What's going on? The mobile unit, we only have one in the borough, and it's at the borough level.
Wow.
So we wanted to do more. So that was something that we committed to. And when the June budget came and we have our allocation, we put in $395,000. So we were able to join NYPD, our borough commander, the district attorney, Darcel Clark, and school safety, RTG, SOS, Guns Down, Life Up, all of our anti-gun violence organizations, and we made an announcement at Borough Hall several weeks ago.
You mentioned here, and of course we've had this dialogue, especially when you were the chair of the Public Safety Committee, about the real roots, and the real roots are making sure our kids are occupied and
Right.
have after-school things. So you were enthusiastic about the adoption of the New York City budget, which
Yes.
relates to all those things.
Yes.
You said it reverses many of the budget cuts that the mayor had previously announced to critical programs and places the city on firmer financial footing moving forward. In all of the things that you talked about, arts and culture, education, housing, all of these
That's right.
go into crime. Talk a little bit about the budget, maybe how it compares to previous budgets when you were in the city council, and of course, how does it affect the Bronx?
Right. So over my 8 years of serving as a council member of District 16, we never thought we would face the global pandemic known as COVID-19. And that really set us back as a city when it came to our financial stability. We were in the red. We had a deficit. We were not getting a lot of support. We had less revenue coming in from property owners and businesses because essentially the city shut down. And we had to make really tough decisions. That was around the momentum when defund the NYPD came about, because it was with the understanding that we could shave a portion of NYPD's budget and focus on education and parks and culture and all the programs that really took a bigger hit than NYPD. And so fast forward, understanding working with the Adams administration, I think the budgets have been better. But earlier this year when the prelim came out, I was very concerned, like the city council, that parks were at stake. Park workers who are DC 37, library services. We lost 3 libraries in the Bronx with 6-day-a-week service. That's not acceptable.
It's not good.
And we fought, we advocated, we added our name to a lot of letters, making sure that the city council and our Bronx delegation would really champion these issues. So the adopted budget that we ultimately did see was far better than it was proposed. There were some cuts, I acknowledge that. But for the Bronx, my goal was to make sure that we maintain school services, after-school program, recreation, non-for-profits were supported, parks, playgrounds, cultural institutions, libraries. So a lot of that was not only restored, Gary, but some of the money was baseline, which is a big deal because that means we don't have to return next year to fight for that money. It has been baseline.
And that will do it for our New Year's show and our look back into the best of 2024. Thanks to our producer, Rebecca Hemick, our director, Will Guzman, Urelis Encarnacion on graphics. Joe Boonchan is on audio. The editor is Yessi Diaz. We have a cast of thousands who work with us here in the studio. And of course, to you too, it's the people of the Bronx. Happy New Year to all, and to all a good night.